What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Talking Tuesday Nights. I am your co-host, Joe Machika, intern Joe. As others know, I will be joined by Mike Yuva in a little bit coming up. A lot to talk about still from the Gator Bowl. Lots of layover, a lot more to talk about as we get some comments rolling in. Excited to hear what you guys think about the game. We will have the call-in number up soon. Big Red, how are we doing, sir? There's a lot to talk about. Also, too, we can touch on. I know Mike wanted to touch on Demar Hamlin too. Obviously, the Bills player went down last night. Super big issue in all of sports right now, and obviously prayers up for Demar. We'll get to that. And Mike's up there in Boston covering the Patriots, so he wanted to touch on that. I know. A lot to talk about. Guys leaving, possibly guys staying, and then the Gator Bowl. I'm going to start with the Gator Bowl. A little bit of layover from that. I've seen the positivity has been decently well, considering the loss in the Gator Bowl. I mean, the Gamecocks played decently well. They gave Notre Dame a really good run at it, honestly, I think they played pretty well. I was not necessarily surprised at how well they played, but that had always been in this team for a good while, and especially with Clemson and Tennessee. But you're going to have guys opting in, opting out coming up here soon. I know Jordan Birch has been of the topic of conversation. Our own Chris Clark and Wes Mitchell have been talking about that a bunch on Birch's future with the team. And so I've been hearing rumblings on that. We can get to that as well. But we'll talk about the Gator Bowl. I know Big Red just got a question. We talk about the penalty on Juju getting the Irish player off Spencer. Isn't that the referee's job? Yes. Personally, when I was watching it, I was a little surprised. It was kind of an early flag. They didn't really give time to go look into what Juju was doing. It was a quick, shove them off, get them off kind of thing. The Notre Dame player wasn't necessarily rolling over on top of him or like doing anything malicious. I think it was just kind of a rollover, chippiness at the end of the play kind of thing. But I do think it is the referee's job, yes, Big Red, to, kind of investigate that a little bit more, see what Juju's intent was. And I mean, personally, I don't think it was malicious. I don't think it was a personal foul level. I think maybe might want to pick that one back up, but I don't know. I mean, that was just it was a tough call to, have in the heat of the moment in the game like that. And so it's really tough to call that in that spot too, when, the team that you're calling it on is trailing, driving with the game on the line. So tough call in that spot. Okay. There we got, so Juice is leaving given his Instagram story. And do I think that means Spencer is 100% leaving? I did see Juice Wells' Instagram story. It's really interesting to me just because, obviously he posted, for those of you who don't know, he posted a picture of the NFL draft. And so that, he could be alluding towards the NFL draft is what people are saying. Personally, I don't know. I'm not really, I don't have any sources in on the situation, but obviously one would think that he's leaning towards the draft with that Instagram story. And one thing I do know is that players' social medias are oftentimes right on how they're feeling. So obviously that would mean, Juice is leaning towards the draft. And now with Spencer, in that case, from what we've heard from Juice is that, it is a separate decision, but Juice will follow Spencer wherever he goes. They have always talked about the duo and what they wanted to do next year and the things that they're building on top of and they want to build if they do come back. They've always talked about that. And, I can remember Juice saying something like, whatever Spencer does, I will be doing. So I don't necessarily know if that's kind of an insight into what Juice or what Spencer is going to be doing, or if that is just a Juice thing. We will see. In the last conversation that I have read with Chris Clark, our very own Chris Clark, with Juice, is that, Juice kind of separated a little bit more. He noted that, his decision and Spencer's decision are different, but at the same time, like I said, they have mentioned that their decisions will, be coinciding previously. So not necessarily sure what we will have with that. Corey, what's good, my man? We just talked about the penalty. Craig, how we doing? Good to have you in. Spencer, just talked about that. I mean, Spencer, we'll see what Spencer does. Personally, I think, he can make, considering the NFL contract, I think he can make more at the collegiate level. Considering his NIL valuation from On3, it does state that he's around $3 million. If I'm right, I think it's around $3 million for Spencer. So I would think that he would make more at the collegiate level next year with NIL and all of his name brand and stuff like that, his name, image, and likeness stuff. So I would think he would make more at the collegiate level than he would as an NFL rookie, especially if he goes as late as he's projected next year. I think that's a really big deal, but I don't know. It might not be about money for Spencer. It may or may not be. I know he's also said when he got here, he really loves this place. He's committed to South Carolina. So I think that's good. It's a good thing for fans to hear, and we've seen that too. I mean, I don't think Spencer's not going to transfer anywhere. It's either the NFL or it's staying. It's coming back to South Carolina. So I think, that does give a little bit of hope. And I mean, personally, before the bowl game, everything that I've heard is that it was closer for him to stay than it would be to leave. But I mean, I'm not as well sourced up as some of my colleagues like Mike, Chris, Wes, Colin, and the boys. So, I mean, Spencer, for me, it's just all based on speculation. I'm not really sure what's going on in his head right now. But again, like we said, it's Juice's Instagram story, the cryptic Instagram story. Obviously, without making an announcement, you would think that Juice is leaning, and then that way, in that case, if you associate the two, that would mean Spencer is leaving. But I mean, I don't know. I think it's closer than a lot of people think, and I think he might be leaning towards coming back. But that's just my speculation and based on the rumors. Do we know if Wells was injured in the car wreck because he didn't look like himself when he took the hit? He didn't look too bad. I did not. When he took that hit, I'm not sure what hit you're talking about, Kevin. You'll have to refresh me. Did our D get tired, or was our offense just not equipped well late in the game? I think it was a little bit of both. I think the couple 3-and-outs that the offense had in the late stages of that game really put the defense back on the field, and they were just exhausted. We saw that with busted coverages, blown containment in the run game. That was a big thing. I mean, Notre Dame exploited that to a T. They had, busted coverage, blown containment. The blown containment thing was something I talked about post game. That was something that I was kind of shocked by. This defense. They did a great job in the first half with, containing Notre Dame's running attack. It was just, I didn't get it in the second half. It just kind of disappeared. And I think a lot of that was because the offense went 3-and-out a couple times, and it just didn't help. I mean, they were on the field for so long. Birch and the defensive line was just exhausted. You can't really substitute. Notre Dame was going quickly. And then, another thing, Marcellus Dial blew the coverage on that last play, that last touchdown pass from Tyler Buckner. So there's a lot of things going on with that. I think also, too, our offense, Freddie Kitchens wasn't aggressive in that second half, plain and simple. Wasn't aggressive as he was in the first half. I mean, yeah, they tried to take some shots, but I think, they not necessarily well equipped, but the game plan wasn't as good for the second half as it was in the first half. They were kind of playing off momentum, and then they just kind of sputtered out and kept sputtering, which is what surprised me a lot. So that was really, really interesting to me. And so Steel Curtain, how we doing, big guy? Love to have you. Erlen, good to have you, my man. Antonio, what's up? Big Red, again, does our tight end room have space for Nicholas Harbor? And does he, if he were to play for us? I think so, yeah. Considering Trey Knox coming in and a couple of those other guys, Reed, McKeeza, and those type of guys, since Nick's a 23, sorry. I think Nick would take a little bit more priority. Obviously, he's going to stand in there and bang with Trey Knox and those kind of guys. So I think it would be interesting. But I think, yes, he's going to stand and bang with the best of them. And, Nick is going to be a very, 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 very good piece to add, obviously, to the tight end room. 5-star recruit, going to be a very, very big piece. We're super athletic and very, very talented, as we are joined by my co-host, Mike Yuva. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I want to apologize to everybody. Obviously, football fans know across the world the sad news last night with the Demar Hamlin situation with the Buffalo Bills. So it is, change up the schedule a little bit, just leaving Gillette Stadium, heading back to the station back in Boston to get ready for the 8 o'clock show. But, that's something that I do want to hit on. I know I was talking with you about it, Joe, and I think with,
100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%. 100%
the things we talk about with football, and not to get sidetracked, not saying that's not important, because it's important enough that we're going to talk about it tonight. But I think it's worth bringing up when we talk about bowl games. So we'll get into it in just a little bit. But Joe, there's a lot obviously to get into tonight when talking about recapping what we saw this weekend in Jacksonville. I had an opportunity to go down there. I can say this. I'll say this. The atmosphere. Okay, I'll start with the atmosphere. The atmosphere that was created by Gamecock fans was absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Oh, yeah.
Gamecock fans turned that venue in Jacksonville into Williams-Brice. And look, are bowl games what they used to be? A lot of these bowl games, no. And the reason why is it's so diluted with the number of bowl games. I know coaches won't say that. I know universities won't say that. Reason being why is, well, some of these universities, I say, they're making good money. Okay, they're making good money when they play in these bowl games. Number one. Number two, we understand the benefits of playing in a bowl game when you're talking about being able to develop younger talent, right? So I bring that up because you're not going to hear people say, oh, these bowl games don't mean anything, okay? When they're keeping score, they're always going to mean something. But they mean something a little bit more when you factor those two things in. I thought based on what we saw with the number of bodies that USC had, and we talked about this after the game of the post-game show, Joe, right? Yeah. They were thin. You knew they were going to be hurting at certain positions. Losing a guy like Nate Atkins, right, for the second half, Juice Wells being shook up early in the game, you just can't have it. And it's not putting blame on those two players, but the point being is when you're so thin, you can't afford to have injuries. And when those things happen, as we saw, South Carolina, they could only throw as many punches as they had left, right? I mean, how do you expect a team to be able to go out there and compete to a point where they're able to get a win like that? The fact that they took Notre Dame the distance, and I know Notre Dame was missing some guys too, but the fact they took them the distance, Joe, I just think speaks volumes of the direction of this program. I'm not a huge moral victory guy, but it's hard to look at this game and get pissed off at the fact that South Carolina came up a touchdown short in a game where they didn't have their OC. A handful of starters weren't playing, especially in the secondary. I can't get mad at this team because this team that we saw on Friday, it's not the same team that we saw throughout the course of the season.
Yeah, Mike, definitely. That's what I was kind of talking about in the intro a little bit. You know, they stood and banged with, one of the top teams in the country. In Notre Dame. And obviously Notre Dame had those quick losses early on in the year with Marshall and Ohio State. But Notre Dame gave a game to Ohio State, college football playoff team Ohio State. So I think it was definitely a win. The defense definitely showed out. I was writing up a little bit on O'Donnell Fortune. That kid, I mean, oh my gosh, he carried some of his momentum going into next year. That's incredible. For sure. Pick six. And, you're right, too, with a lot of guys out and everything, this team showed, I mean, at least defensively, Clayton White and his defense showed that they can stand and bang with the best of them, especially like when they have guys out, they can plug guys in. And, that had kind of been a question all year with the injuries and stuff like that. It's like, can you plug in guys and still be as effective as a defense? And, Clayton White at Florida, they were missing some guys, and it was just kind of like, that was a big mark on Clayton White's record. When you're missing guys and your defense plays like that, like what the heck, man? But so I think, obviously, like you talked about, when you're missing guys like that and still have a pretty good defensive performance like you did, obviously it helps and kind of continues the momentum. Not as much as momentum as you would want if you won, but I think that's just about as close as you can get to holding on to any momentum going forward.
They went toe to toe with a program, and I know there's going to be people out there that hate on Notre Dame. That's fine. If you're going to do that, that's fine. Okay, if that's your agenda, that's fine. Okay. Yeah. Bottom line is Notre Dame's a national brand. It doesn't matter. It's kind of like the Yankees, right? Lakers. It doesn't matter if they're having an off year or not. There's going to be eyeballs. There were plenty of eyeballs. As soon as I got back up to Massachusetts, right, I have to get ready to cover the Patriots on Sunday. The number of people, the number of reporters that came up to me and said, man, what a game. what a performance by Shane Beamer and the Gamecocks. Because for some of them, they hadn't watched South Carolina this year. And again, like we mentioned, that wasn't them that wasn't them fully armed, right? Because of the number of bodies that they didn't have going into that game. I think a lot of people who have not paid attention to South Carolina, I'd say probably for over a decade, right? I mean, we're getting close to that point, that 2013 season. It's 10 years away. There's people that are taking notice to what's going on there. Now, again, it's 2 years in. I know there's going to be people that want to compare resumes and doing this and that. Oh, that's what Muschamp had for, a record the first two. Can you friggin' use just some freaking logic for a second? Can you watch how things have played out on the field in the manner in which it did this season? The teams they friggin' beat at the end of the year, right? The momentum that we're seeing carry over to a recruiting standpoint, to a point where when you're talking about the caliber blue chip players, which are 4 and 5 stars, as of right now, South Carolina is over that 50% threshold, which if you go back over the last decade plus, that's only happened a handful of times. Some of that, of course, that took place during some of the greatest years of South Carolina football. And of course, I'm talking about when Steve Spurrier was head coach. So I bring that up because, yes, we'll have to see how year 3 goes, right? You're only as good as what you do next, right? So I bring all that up because I'm not saying, all right, throw a parade on Main Street. I'm not saying that where the bar is right now, you should be like, all right, this is perfect. Yeah, 8 wins. That's exactly where we want to be. You got to friggin' realize who you are, okay? It's just the reality of it. Some people don't want to admit it. Some people, I think they have the freaking common sense to realize they're not Clemson right now, okay? They're not Georgia. They're not Alabama. They're trying to work their way to get to a point where they can be in those conversations. Oh, yeah. Yes, you beat Clemson this year. That's phenomenal, okay? That's phenomenal. You need to do that consistently, though. What Clemson has been able to do for a decade. I don't care what friggin' conference they're in. I don't. TCU, is that conference phenomenal? No. But you know what? They go win a national championship. You really think they care what Johnny3246 is saying on Twitter or what someone's saying on a message board? No. They're in the national championship. So I say that because, yes, you know what? We understand how difficult it is to get out of the SEC. Things are going to change over the next couple of years with Texas coming in, with Oklahoma coming in, with the college football playoffs changing as a whole. Yeah. But with all that stuff aside, South Carolina, where they are today, they are in a better spot than they were 2 years ago. They're in a better spot than they were a year ago. And if they continue to make the progress that we've seen since Shane Beamer came in year 1 and what we saw in year 2, they're going to get closer and closer and closer to being able to be in those discussions with some of those teams. Now, of course, when I mentioned the Georgias, the Alabamas, the Clemsons, of course, they've won national championships in the last couple of years, okay? I'm not saying they have to win a national championship to get, okay? We understand that. What I'm saying is to be able to be in the conversation of competing for conference titles, for competing to get into the college football playoff. We've seen that with Tennessee this year. Tennessee did a phenomenal job, right? They're in a similar situation where they had a coach that came in a year ago, right, trying to rebuild an absolute mess, and he's done a very nice job with it, okay? The difference is Tennessee, even as Marcus Lattimore has pointed out to me in the past, they're a national brand, okay? South Carolina, they have a little bit more work to do, but that's okay. That's okay. That's not to say they can't get to a level like that. It's just going to take a little bit longer. But I think what we've seen in a short period of time, Joe, with the intern Joe, what we've seen in the short period of time, the sample size, it should make you feel good with the direction of where this program is heading. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying there's going to be people, why are you mentioning? I'm using them as an example, okay? They're an in-state school, okay? You know them very well. It's a good school to use as an example. It's a good school to use as an example. And you beat that school this year. You go and do that again next season, think about that momentum. Think of the momentum if you're able to get to 8 wins in the regular season next year or a 9 win. You just build off of it. That's what it's about right now, Joe.
Yeah, Mike. I mean, I think you make a good point there. It all starts with beating Clemson if you do want to start establishing a national brand. And it also starts with recruiting. I think this 2023 class is definitely a start to kind of make a splash in recruiting in this and just national on a national level. You bring in a top 15, top 20 class in 2023. It definitely sends a message to other recruits that they can do it. They are more than able to recruit guys and bring in big talent. So I think that's a good point. And also, too, I think it does start with beating Clemson consistently. You look at how Clemson did it. They started they started towards the back end of the South Carolina Spurrier days when they were highly ranked and all that. They started by beating South Carolina and started building momentum off of that. That is how they do it, and that's how South Carolina needs to do it. They need to flip the script and start beating Clemson consistently if they want to, be up in that top corner as top echelon of college football, be a higher brand. And I think Beamer's charismatic enough to do it. Justin King and what the media department are perfect, for being a national brand, and they certainly have catered it already. So I think that definitely helps. But I mean, yeah, a lot to talk about from the bowl game, and I think that's one piece. I think you stood and banged with one of the better brands in college football, and a lot of people were watching that game. Like you said, Mike, you had people mention it to you at the station. There were a lot of people watching that game. I think the only other game at the time was the Barstool Arizona Bowl or something like that, and that was on Barstool.com. There was really nothing else on, so all the eyes were on South Carolina. And Donald Fortune pick six made it that much better. It made it. I had my friends text me kicking and screaming about that pick six, and boy, did it silence my living room. Oh my goodness, I was so happy. But yeah, I mean, lot to come from that, and plenty more to talk about. But we have a comment from KC who pissed in Mike's cereal.
Yeah, I want to real quick, okay? If you've been watching me over the last couple of years, this is how I talk. I'm from Boston, okay? This is just how I talk. No one's saying anyone's pissed off. Just because someone talks directly does not mean they're pissed off, all right? Some people in the South like to say, bless your heart, because they want to beat around the bush. I'm direct, okay? I just say you're a dumbass, all right? That's just how we do things. It's not about being
driving,
pissed off.
Too.
No,
you're driving. Mike does get a little pissy when he drives.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's just the Boston in me when you're driving.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I think
maybe New Year's resolution for you.
Look, the bottom line is what I'm trying to get at is I think that, again, the people that have common sense, they understand where South Carolina was a couple years ago. They understand that what we saw this season, this is all good, okay? And we obviously, intern Joe, we work on a message board, so you're not going to be able to please everybody, right? Especially when it comes to social media, in terms of what we saw from South Carolina this year, and that's okay. That's okay. I think the masses, I think the majority of fans would all agree that this was a successful season. What I'm trying to get at is there's still obviously work to be done, okay? And it's okay to acknowledge that the bar has been risen. Has it got to a point yet where it's like, okay, everything's good? It's okay to say that. It's not there yet. But where this team was 2 years ago, where this team was a year ago, this is awesome. This is awesome. This is good. I mean, shoot, 2 wins a couple of years ago. Remember that? I want to transition real quickly, though, Joe. I want to transition to what we were talking about with the Demar Hamlin situation with the Bills, because I think it ties in from a where we're standing with the bowl game the other day, and some people talking about things. Of course, we're talking about college football, and we're talking about pro football, right? It's not apples to apples. However, it's the same thing when you're talking about the risk, even going all the way down to high school and youth football, right? Obviously, the speed's not the same when you're playing youth football, Pop One, or Little League, whatever you call it, depending on where you are from the part of the country. But I bring these things up because it's been something that, from a working standpoint for me today, That's all my focus has been on. Patriots are playing the Bills this week. From a game standpoint, how is that going to impact that? But talking to some of these former players, some of these former NFL players, and honestly, I've had time to shoot messages to college players. I've had a chance to talk with some South Carolina players about their feelings about this. I think, obviously, again, a situation like this, you think so much NFL. It's football, though, at the end of the day. So I bring all this up because, and this isn't directed at anyone, but I just think big picture, okay? The people that were bitching about players opting out, okay? I've said this before. As a player, if I'm on that team, am I going to be bummed if one of the players opt out because he wants to get ready for the NFL draft? Of course I'm going to be bummed. I don't care who it is. It could be a starter. It could be the guy that's on the bottom of the roster from a depth standpoint. I don't care who it is. I'm going to be bummed, no question about it. But at the same time, too, when you're talking about draft, right? All it takes is one play to change your life. And obviously the situation that took place on Monday Night Football is the extreme of the extreme. But it really puts things into perspective, okay? So whether it be what we saw last night, which I pray to God, number one, that Demar's going to be okay, okay? We're talking about life and death here. I hope he's going to be okay, first and foremost, as a person. But that, as well as spinal cord injuries, as well as concussions, as well as someone just even breaking their foot, breaking their hand, whatever the case may be. Anytime a football player takes the field, they are putting their body on the line. It is the part of the game that many, many people don't want to acknowledge. They don't want to acknowledge. But what we saw last night was a reminder. It was a reminder of the element of the game that no one wants to talk about, the elephant in the room. And sadly, it gets overlooked so much. I was fortunate to play this game. I'm fortunate to make a living talking about this game, both covering college football and pro football. I've been around the game since the day I came out of the hospital because my dad's been coaching for over 39 years. I love football. I absolutely love it. But anytime you put your body out there on the field, you are risking your life. Whether people want to look at it that way or not, you are risking your life. And last night was a reminder to that. So I say this. Last night, that is the extreme of the extreme, okay? That is the extreme of the extreme. But when people bitch about, oh, this guy's not playing, let's take a step back next time, okay? Let's take a step back and remember that these freaking people are people first. They're people. So calling them a quitter, saying they're selfish, you know what? They're putting their life on the line. And the difference with college football compared to pros, they're not getting paid for it. Yes, there's NIL opportunities. It's not the same. Not every player is getting paid, number one. But number two, they're not getting paid nearly the same amount. They understand when they sign up what the risks are. They understand what the risks are. As fans, as people who cover the game, right? We watch from an entertainment standpoint. And it's so easy to lose sight of the fact that these are people first. They're people first. So again, all I'm saying is this. Enjoy this game. I'm going to enjoy this. But when we get to this time next year, right, and players opt out, okay, I understand. I want to see every player play because I want to see the best of the best. I want to, okay? But if you were one of those people that were bitching this year that someone was opting out, just think about this moment, please. That's all I'm asking for. Please, okay? Because there's so many factors that go into playing football that I think people on the outside and even media, you overlook, you take for granted. Things like this. Again, this is the extreme of the extreme, and I pray to God that we never, ever see a situation like this ever again. And I hope Demar is okay, first and foremost. But football's going to go on. And these players Okay? This is something that I hope to God that we don't see, people walk away from the game, whether it be from a college standpoint, pro standpoint, maybe even high school and little league. Maybe parents are scared of their kids playing. But if they do, just realize again, they're people. That's all I'm asking. That's all I'm asking.
Yeah, Mike. I mean, I couldn't have said it any better myself. Obviously, life is a very precious thing, and in this game that we play, that football, it's a violent one, and so to see something like that, it was just kind of the realities of it all. Just kind of happened. So it happened so fast, and so a lot of people, it's a lot of fears coming to reality, and unfortunately for Demar, he's in critical condition and everything, and just we got to keep praying for him. Got to keep doing what we can on the donation front. I've seen the thing that's kind of I think is the coolest part about this whole thing, I guess, is the amount of money that's been raised for his foundation, and within 24 hours it was over. I believe it's probably close to 5 million now. Last time I checked, it was close to 4 this afternoon, or it was over 4 this afternoon. So obviously you got to keep Demar Hamlin in your prayers. It just proves how fragile life is. It looked like a routine hit in football.
It's precious, Joe. Joe,
Yeah,
I'll
exactly.
say this. I'll say this, okay? In a situation like this, I try not to. I'm bringing this situation up because I just want people to have an idea of sometimes of what some of these players are going through, okay? I hate inserting certain stories based on like a situation like this, but hear me out. This is why I'm bringing this up. In high school, I had 2 teammates that fractured their neck. They're C5. They were triplets. There's actually a story on them called Running for 3. E60 did it back in around 2009, maybe. You can find it on somewhere, I don't know, somewhere on the internet. I don't know if it's still up on ESPN, whatever the case may be. I bring this up because I remember that second time, because the first time it wasn't as bad. That second time, though, motionless, and he went down to the Shepherd Center in Atlanta, and he's been battling not just his life. He's been battling his life. He's trying to walk again. He's still in a wheelchair, and this is almost 15 years later. I bring this up because that game got stopped right then when that happened. Okay? I don't think as high school student athletes, I don't think we truly understood what was going on, because we're taught at a young age, when you get hurt, injuries are part of the game. Get up, play, right? Next thing, right? That shook us to our core. And what happens is when a situation, even with a spinal cord injury, happens, you think a little bit more when you play. And the worst thing that you can do as a player is think. Because when you think, especially as a defensive player, you tend to play slower. And when you tend to play slower, what happens? You're more likely to get hurt. I bring all this up, okay? I bring all this up to tie into, obviously, this is the extreme of the extreme, what we saw last night. The extreme of the extreme. But if that did that, okay, and we've seen this in the NFL before, we've seen it in college with spinal cord injuries, but if that can make someone think about that, what does a situation like this do? Okay? What does a situation like this do to some of these players? I've had a chance to talk to some of the guys across the NFL today. Patriots weren't in the building, okay? There were supposed to be press conferences today. Those got canceled or postponed, okay? I bring all that up because when you think about situations like last night, it's not just about the Bills. It's not just about the Bengals. It's every player across the league, even going to college. How does this impact just the psyche of players when they go out there now on the field again? Because they're going to be thinking about situations like this. You don't want them to be playing slow. You don't want them to be playing slow because if they do that, they're putting themselves in risk of getting hurt. So again, I bring this up because this is something that is not just a Bills thing. Obviously, you want Lamar. We pray. We pray for Demar Hamlin. We pray for everyone. We pray for T. Higgins. former Clemson wide receiver, someone that I had the privilege of covering when I worked at Watch Fox, a tremendous young man. It's a freak accident. There's nothing that he could have done differently. You could see the tweet that he put out last night. That young man's hurting. Keep him in your prayers. There's players across the league right now that are hurting, not just the Bills and the Bengals. And there's plenty of players out there that are going to be scared right now. We talked about it. Think about with Marshawn Lloyd, how many times we talked about the injury, coming back from an ACL injury. When you come back from an injury, how much you think of making a cut, right? Well, this is a mental injury, and you didn't even have to be the one on the field. You could have been just someone that watched it from afar. A lot of these players are going to have scars from this. They're going to be hurting mentally right now, and it's going to take some time for some of these players to overcome some of those mental scars.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. And I think Nick said it best too. Appreciate the comment, Nick, because like that's another thing we don't think about is kind of what his family's going through. It's a pretty powerful thing when you do think about it. So not only praying for Demar, but praying for his family as well. Got a couple more comments rolling in, a couple more questions. Any truth about this potential Rocket Sanders transfer to South Carolina rumor going on? Mike, have you heard anything about Rocket Sanders? And if so, what have you got?
Well, I think right now, this is how we always treat transfer situations. Okay, I've learned this from Chris and Wes, two of the best when it comes to recruiting, and I classify transfer portal as recruiting as well. I think some would say, okay, well, that goes without saying. It's a different type of recruiting, obviously, in comparison to just coming out of high school or junior college, but I categorize everything the same. I say all that because what I've learned, and we're still learning about the transfer portal, right? What I've learned is in situations like this, 90% of the time, you have to treat them, if not 100% of the time, fluid, right? Because every situation is fluid. You might think that something's going on, and especially now, in an era where NIL just continues to grow, you can't say anything for certain that, oh yeah, this looks good, or oh yeah, that's the direction it's heading in. So I say all that because, yes, South Carolina is certainly in the mix, okay? But to sit here, and I know you're not asking me to say, okay, what's the percentage, but what I'm trying to get at is I could say something tonight. You could go to the water cooler tomorrow at work. Well, Mike's saying that, it's leaning that way. All it takes is one phone call, one text, one DM to a individual, not just Sanders in this case, but any player, and it changes entirely. So all I'm going to say about the situation, based on what we know, that South Carolina is in the mix. I know that might not be exactly the answer you're looking for. I'm sure you're looking for a little bit more. I wish I could give you a little bit more, but I think the safe thing to say right now, based on where things are, is that South Carolina is in the mix, but nothing is a done deal quite yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point. And South Carolina's put together already a pretty decent transfer class. Obviously, it's still growing, still building. They got what they needed in the tight ends, which will be great. It'll be a really good thing. So I'm looking forward to it. Trey Knox, you got Nick Elskins from Florida. He'll be a big talent. He'll be really good. I think, because we saw him out at practice when they opened up the first bowl practice to the media. God,
intern Joe, just go back.
Yeah, when they opened up the first bowl practice to the media.
Intern Joe, you give him the keys one night.
It was not yet.
Joe.
Let's see.
About the tight ends.
Yeah.
Joe, intern Joe, I want to say this real quick because I know there's a lot of people, and it's kind of ironic because it feels like, the running joke for years, especially with Carolina calls, is we're going to throw the ball to the tight end. Well, I think the answer is going to be yes this upcoming year. But this is what I'll say about South Carolina loading up at the tight end position. If we've seen anything in college football, and you could say even in the NFL, but especially college football, that tight end position has really evolved over the last 5 years. Really evolved, okay? You're seeing, obviously, what the tight end at Georgia's doing. We saw what the tight end at Notre Dame did, who is one of the best blocking tight ends in the country. And I think that's what's really going to help him. But he's dynamic as well. He can make a difference out there in the receiving game. I know it didn't probably amount to what we were hoping this season with Jaheim Bell. But based on what we've seen in the past from him, and even at times this past season, before he obviously transferred out in South Carolina, he's a guy that's dynamic. We're seeing that happen more, right? We're seeing that happen more in college football. So I bring that up because when you look at some of the players that South Carolina has, the obvious, Trey Knox, right? He was recruited by Justin Stepp to go to Arkansas as a receiver. Then he moved over to tight end. I bring this up because the days of, okay, you're a tight end, you're going to be attached to the line of scrimmage more than anything else. I'm not going to say they're over. I think it all depends on the skill set a player has, as well as what the scheme is, schematically, what you are trying to accomplish. And obviously, we're still trying to figure that out. I think we can sit here and say, okay, Dal Loggins, he's going to have this NFL-style offense. He wants to have a lot of NFL principles installed into his offense. But at the same time, too, I think what he's going to do a better job of than what we saw the past 2 seasons for the majority of the time. I don't want to say that Marcus Satterfield wasn't able to do it at times, but I think where South Carolina struggled, because I do think Satterfield does bring things to the table that he is knowledgeable at. But I also feel like at times he tried to force things to happen because he wanted to do it a certain way, and it just wasn't going to work with the personnel that South Carolina had, or they weren't able to pick up on things in a manner in which he was hoping that they were going to be able to pick it up. So I say that because I feel like Dowell's going to do a better job of catering to the strengths and weaknesses that South Carolina has. And as a result, I do think you're going to see the tight end used heavily in this offense, but in a manner that doesn't have to be traditional, in a manner that can be, I say the word hybrid, that tight end / wide receiver, a guy that you can see more so detached from the line of scrimmage opposed to being attached to the line of scrimmage. So I think you're going to see South Carolina get creative because, it's like going golfing, Joe. For whatever reason, you have if you have a couple clubs that are the same in your bag, maybe one hits the ball a little bit differently, right? If you have a couple 5-irons for whatever reason, you're a jabber way to get creative and be able to use them if you don't have, a 6-iron or a 4-iron, just based on the way it hits the ball. It looks like we have a call coming in. I'll see if intern Joe can get that set up. But again, guys, if you're just joining us, obviously a lot of talk about where the direction of South Carolina football is heading into as we head into 2023. Happy New Year, everybody. Obviously a disappointing bowl loss, but again, I don't think that takes anything away from what we were able to see South Carolina accomplish this season.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have Lamont on the phone. Lamont, if you're ready, go ahead. You got us, Lamont. All right, go ahead. What was your question?
I don't know if the audio's coming through, Joe. You might have to replay it just in case.
Absolutely. I got him. Thank you for calling in, Lamont. He was asking about what an impact Dakereon Joyner will make for his senior season, super senior season.
Well, I think first and foremost, it's the things that he brings, the intangibles, right? The things that he brings off the field, what he brings in the locker room, things that people take for granted, fans take for granted, coaches need to have in the locker room. Justin Stepp has talked about it. There were things that this past season, even going back to last year, that he didn't have to worry about because he knew Dakereon was going to take care of those things. And it's one less thing that a coach has to worry about when you talk about the morale, having to hold players accountable in a manner in which I wouldn't call it babysitting, but it gets to a point where it can teeter that way, right? So I bring that up because when you have a guy like DeCarrion, it's something that a lot of people can easily take for granted. So I think it starts there. Now, from a skill set standpoint, I know there's going to be people out there saying, well, they should give him a shot at quarterback. Let's just, I don't like doing the hypotheticals, but just for the sake of the conversation, if Spencer Rattler does leave, in my opinion, what's going to happen is this. Unless South Carolina brings someone in from the transfer portal, which right now I don't anticipate that happening. But Luke Doty's going to get the first shot. Okay, Luke Doty's going to get the first shot. I know that there's going to be people saying, "Oh, Lenore." The guy hasn't even stepped on campus yet. Okay, can we slow down first? I'm not trying to take anything away from the kid, but let's slow down. Okay, how many times have we seen that song and dance play out before? Let the kid get on campus first. Let the kid get acclimated to not just the playbook, but the speed of the game. That's not to say that he's not smart enough, because of course he is. We understand, not just from a football standpoint, just as a person, his high IQ. But let him get in here and get acclimated first. And if he can make an impact right away, that's awesome. But I feel like what we will see is Doty will get the first crack at it. Now, where does the carry-on kind of work in there? Does he have an opportunity to play quarterback? He might. I think what you'll see with the carry-on more than anything, I think he will be a guy that makes an impact in the wide receiver room. I think what people need to remember is at the beginning of the season, he was hurt. He was dealing with a calf injury that was really bad. I think it was kind of portrayed as it not being so serious. It was pretty serious. It was hurting. From people that I talked to close to the situation, it was pretty bad. And DeCarrion was pushing through. He was still playing on special teams. I know it was limited at the beginning of the year, but he really pushed through. So I bring that up because when you look at the makeup of the wide receiver room, it was the most talented wide receiver room we've seen in quite some time at South Carolina, okay, on paper. And I think we saw spurts of it from certain players at times. Was it consistent with every player across the board all season? No. But I do feel like we saw some improvement in that wide receiver room. And I think with DeCarrion next season, because he's been able to develop his game at wide receiver, I think he will make a bigger splash in that room. I think you will see him with the new OC. I think you're going to want to see him try to make an impact at quarterback. But I think he will play in that wide receiver room. And I think you'll continue to see him make a difference on special teams because he is just someone that's so dynamic. You want to, and I don't even say want to, you need to find ways to get him on the field. The more times that DK is on the field, the better I feel like your team will be. I think he's that dynamic.
Yeah, I think it's plain and simple. Obviously, you want him back as a leader. DeCarrion Joyner is one of the best leaders that Beamer's had yet. He's talked about it in length on what a person he is and how pivotal he is off the field as well as on the field. When he does get his touches, when he does get the chance to do the Dak package and get a chance to make an impact on the field, I think it's pivotal. And so I think obviously the quarterback situation, I don't necessarily think Dak will be playing in the quarterback, or be in the mix for that quarterback position. Obviously, there will still be the Dak package, and we will see him a little bit more at wide receiver and kind of slot back. Maybe do a little something what they did with Jaheim Bell and kind of what they did with Debo a little bit, with kind of swinging him out into motion.
And intern Joe, real
throwing
quick.
it to him out in the flat. DeCarrion's a big – yeah.
Real quick, okay? Because I know there's going to be people saying, why not have Dak at quarterback? Dak had an opportunity when he came in to be the starting quarterback, okay? Now, whether you want to agree with it or not, saying did he have a fair crack at it or not, he had an opportunity to get it, okay? No one is saying that he's not capable of playing quarterback. We've seen what he's able to do at quarterback. But they have some talented QBs in that room, okay?
Yeah.
Don't overlook that.
Obviously.
It's not a situation where you're at a school where there's no one that's performing. And in the past, right, in the past, there were some guys that were pretty talented. So I say that because he had an opportunity. And based on how those things played out at that time, okay, hear me out. At that time, in the coach's eyes, he was not the best option for them, okay? Now, again, that was at that time. That's not to say if that is what he wants right now. If that's what he wants and he wants to compete as a QB, because I think that's the other thing that gets lost here. There's a lot of people that are vouching for him to do this. DK will do whatever they say that he wants, whatever they need him to do. But from what I've been able to gather, I think he's leaning more so to wanting to play receiver. Because I feel like he's starting to finally feel comfortable with being in a room. He loves the positional coach, okay? Never mind that. And I think he realizes that there's a higher ceiling for him at that position, okay? When you're talking about playing at the next level. So I bring that up. Just because I think there's so many people that are like, Dak should deserve to play QB. If that's what he wants, he'll have that opportunity. If anyone has earned that, DQ, I just drove by a Dairy Queen. DK deserves that. There's no question about that. But I do feel like regardless, if he does play wide receiver this year, if he does, okay, we sit here talking about the talent that South Carolina is bringing in at QB. Can we at least see what happens there? All right. Can we see what happens there? And if they want to put DK out there to compete at QB, again, that's if he wants it. And he deserves to have that right over anybody. Okay. Yeah. That'd be the first thing that I would do. I'm Shane Beamer. I'm sitting down. What do you want to do? Do you want to give it a shot at QB? Okay. And this is assuming Rattler leaves. If Rattler's there, Rattler's your guy. Guy. Okay. Yeah. And if Rattler's your guy, would you rather have to carry on in the QB room as a backup at number 2? Or would you rather have him in the wide receiver room? To me, I'd rather find a way to get him on the field. That's not saying what he did this year and he did in the past, that he can't go back and forth. But I think that's not fair to him. I don't think that's fair for him when you're telling, hey, we want you to be in the wide receiver room, but we also want you to be a backup QB. I think there's some people out there that are like, oh, that's great for DK. Honestly, more than anything, it's really not. Because now he's devoting less time at just one position. To me, again, ask him what he wants to do. If he wants to compete for a quarterback spot, if he doesn't get it, and he's okay with being a backup or whatever the case may be, depending on how the chips fall, right? If he's okay with that, that's all right. But if he says, you know what, I want to play wide receiver. I would like to be able to be in the mix at QB a little bit, but I want to focus at receiver, then that's what he should do. Whatever he wants to do, he's earned that right, in my opinion.
Yeah, Mike, absolutely. I think, the quarterback conversation, you should go into it, right? Asking Dak, what he feels comfortable. And he's been here long enough and has done enough for this program that, and I believe Beamer is having these conversations with him on what he wants to do. What do you think your role is? That's part of the exit and entry interviews that he has with players. And so I think it's really, pivotal for him to, not only have a say in the offense, and I'm sure he's working with Dowell on that too, on, what he thinks the offense should look like. He's definitely got some say. And I know Dowell has kind of offered that up too, that he's going to give the players a little bit more say here too on the playbook and what they want to run. And obviously Dak coming back is huge because, he deserves it. And he's been here long enough, and him coming back is even more of a testament to him as a person, as a player, and just kind of give it one more run with a school that he's given so much to and that he's devoted his most, a lot of his life to as well. I think it's a testament to him as a player, as a person. And so obviously, Mike, he should have, a say in the offense and a say of, not only the offense, but his role too. I think it's huge. Absolutely huge.
And one thing too, Joe, and I've mentioned this the other day, that DeCarrion is a perfect example of how a player doesn't need to be an all-conference guy, doesn't even have to be a starter for the majority of the season. He's a perfect example of if you go into a situation, you work your tail off, you're ready for when that your number's called, as we saw in the Duke's Mayo Bowl last year, and you stick things out. right? I mean, there's been so many people, I feel like, over the last couple of years. Oh, he should transfer to this school. Oh, he could be a QB here. Oh, he could do that. Well, number one, do you know if that's what he wants to do? I know there were times in the past that he really thought about. He thought about walking away from the game altogether. But with that being said, and I'm making this up, okay? I'm just going to use an in-state school because I saw some MEAC examples, right? He goes to a school like South Carolina State. We know the history of South Carolina State, how much talent has come out of that school. They have more NFL Hall of Famers than Clemson and South Carolina. We understand that, okay? We understand the talent. I'm using that for an example, though. The NIL is just not there. It's not the same, okay? It's not the same. I mean, shoot, yes, you're going to have situations like, some of the guys at Jackson State, the Travis Hunters, before obviously he transferred to Colorado, Shiloh Sanders, a former Gamecock player, right? So I bring up those guys because there's going to be outliers, right? Outliers, excuse me. Dak goes to a school like that, even if he plays out of his mind, are the NIL opportunities that he's been able to gain so far right now, are they even close? I think the answer is no, sadly. So, again, I'm using that as an example because I saw some, why does he go to, North Carolina Central or, go to A&T or, I'm bringing those up. It doesn't even have to be an HBCU. It doesn't. It could be a Group 5 school, right? I'm saying just a hair lower than the SEC. I'm just using those as an example. Is that maybe what he set out for when he went to college? No, I'm sure he wanted to be a starter from day one or be a starter as quickly as you can, especially at the quarterback position, and then go to the NFL, right? I mean, that's the dream that a lot of these kids have. It didn't play out that way. However, he worked his tail off. He's one of the toughest people, and I said this after the game the other night, from getting to know DK away from the field. It's obviously been well documented, his story, going back to high school and when he was younger, losing his father at a young age, forcing himself to have to grow up at a very young age and being the man of that family. And obviously now getting ready to be a father at a fairly young age. He's had to grow up very quickly. And you think of just those things and just the weight that can put on a young person. And he's been able to handle it to an absolute T. But then you throw into the mix everything that he's had to deal with from a football standpoint. It's hard to even fathom how he's been able to do all of this in such a high character manner to a point where he's a role model to not just younger people, but honestly, people that are even my age and older, just because of how he's handled adversity. I think it's a lesson for everybody that can, watch how he's handled things and be like, man, how the hell has he not broke? How is he not broke down? He's just mentally tough. So I bring all that up because, again, I think we get so caught up sometimes of what's in the best interest of a player. And we lose sight of, how things have played out at South Carolina. I mean, man, again, with the circumstances being the way they are, with him getting ready to have a little girl in a couple months this spring, I'd say things probably worked out better than anything that he could imagine because he's gaining so much money through NIL right now that he's really putting himself, his daughter, his family in a really good situation. And what gets lost too, intern Joe, is that from conversations I've had with people that know him, if he doesn't want to play football after this season, meaning he doesn't want to pursue the NFL, or say the NFL doesn't work, there's already companies that have reached out to him that said, hey, we want you to be part of our business. Think about that. There are people reaching out to him saying, we want you on our team. And I don't know, the specifics of some of those jobs. I know some, but I bring that up because, again, it's just a lot of people on the outside think they know what's best for some of these players. Okay? How things have played out for him right now, again, with NIL, I don't know if that happens at other schools. I don't. I really don't.
Absolutely. I think that's the biggest part of him coming back is the NIL side of things. I think it's huge for him, and especially with his daughter coming up this spring. Him staying on in the fall, he has all summer to do NIL appearances, opportunities, all that stuff. So I think it's huge for him just to be able to provide. And he obviously after this year will try his shot at the NFL, and I'm not necessarily sure how high he will go, how high or low. Obviously, he's a dynamic player, can do it all. So we'll see about his NIL future, but I think on his NFL future, sorry. But I think the NIL side of things for Dakereon Joyner is huge, and South Carolina has done a great job. The fan base has done a great job in supporting him already. So I think it's huge, especially for a guy like that.
I got to get off in a little bit, but real quickly, I know someone mentioned Dante Reno. Right now, he's for the class of 2024. Okay, so I'm not really thinking Reno right now. Now, again, and I've said this before, if Rattler transfers out, there's a possibility that Reno could reclassify. Right now, I don't think that's going to be the case. But I'm focusing, just on the 2023 season, because again, if Rattler does come back, okay, then you have a good idea of who's going to be the QB, right? But things will change, of course, from 2023 to 2024. Even if some of these guys, you look at Lenoris, right? How does he develop? How quickly does he develop at the quarterback position for South Carolina? Those are things that we're not going to really know in terms of how that impacts Reno until he gets on campus. So again, as of right now, Reno's not planning on coming onto campus until the 2024 season. But again, that could all change. That could all change based on how things play out with Rattler's situation. I was told that, it's something that you can't rule out with Reno. Intern Joe, if we can pull up those ads real quickly, about to walk back into the station to get ready for this 8 o'clock show. Just want to make sure that we give a shout out to our sponsors who have been absolutely outstanding for such a long period of time with Gamecock Central. This show today is brought to you by, like it always is, our good friends over at Liberty Tax. Tax season, we're at the end of the year, so now you're getting ready for a new year. Let them help you out. Give them a call at 803-462-5576. They'll be able to help you overcome your taxiety. And today's program is also brought to you by our good friend Clint Hammond at the Mortgage Network. We talk about it every freaking week. Buying a home right now, it's not easy. Those rates are absolutely insane. And if you're a ham bone like me or intern Joe, you need someone to help you out. Or you might not be a ham bone. It could be like a guy like Perry Yorth. And Perry decided to give Clint a call, and he was able to help him take care of his situation of getting a home. Give Clint a call over at the Mortgage Network at 803-576-4450. Intern Joe, I think we're going to wrap things up. If you want to be able to, keep the show going for a little bit, you can, man. But I think, we hit on a lot tonight.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, wasn't really dwelling on the Gator Bowl because I think at the end of the day, we understood that there's a lot of good things that are happening with this program right now, regardless of the outcome the other night.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of good going forward. And I think, I forget who it was, but the comments kind of touched on it that, there's momentum to be carried from the Gator Bowl. And obviously, playing a brand like Notre Dame, having a game like you did, it's big. So obviously not much else to take from it other than, the positivity and what it kind of means going forward. But yeah, and I think it was good that we touched on the Bills player, Demar. I think that was really good to touch on it, because obviously it's such a big issue in sports right now, and just, really, really good to bring it up, make sure we're praying for him and doing what we can for him and his family.
Well, I appreciate everyone that tuned in tonight. We'll keep the party rolling next week, so be sure to join us next week on GC Live Talking Tuesday night. He's intern Joe. I'm Mike Yuba. Have yourself a great Tuesday night and a great week.